All right. It is 4:02. We will go ahead and call our redistricting commission meeting to order. Thank you all so much. Another week of really great support from our city staff team. So thanks in advance to Brian, Cal, Beth and team, the entire communications team, and Matt and Emily, and Melissa, who has definitely been guiding us along this process. Hello, commissioners. Good to see you. We'll go through our agenda, which was sent out. We have now moved through almost a week of our website being up, with a few days with the feedback being open. And so I'll be reading that feedback as before we move into our scenario visits, so that we can keep this consideration in mind. Thank you to those who are joining us via Channel 2 in Zoom. Once again, feel free to share any questions or comments in the chat of Zoom if you're joining us there. Or you can also, of course, open up the web page and you can add your feedback as we move through this today's session. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Commissioner Vicky for our common language and grounding.
Thank you. We appreciate people coming here and also on Zoom and watching on television so we can get the word out to as many people as possible. We are the Redistricting Commission, appointed by the mayor for a very specific task. We're community members representing all 6 council districts. We don't work for the city, aren't paid by the city, as far as I know. And our task is to redraw the city's council district boundary lines because by charter, we are, it's necessary to do that so that it's based on the U.S. census that's done every 10 years. And the purpose is to make sure that our council districts are equitable, both in size and in making sure that it's possible for one person, one vote to always apply, to keep our council districts contiguous and as coherent as possible, which is a challenge with the shape of our city, makes this difficult. So it's kind of like a jigsaw puzzle. And when you change one thing, it automatically changes something else. So that will be explained more when we go through different scenarios. We want to be as transparent as possible. We need to pay attention to our legal issues that have to be met. And we're trying to get done by early December because the city council does have to approve a new map by charter by the end of the year. So that gives them time to go through the approval process at the council. In the meantime, we're having several open public meetings we hope people will come to. They're on the website. We'll probably go over them again today. And then we have a few other meetings for organizations that have requested them. And we realize that not everybody can do this digitally, so we want to make sure we have in-person meetings available also to get as much feedback as possible.
Perfect. Thank you. Thorough. How about that? I'm going to say thorough. Thank you so much. And so we'll go ahead and move on, and I'll ask for any media or engagement requests. So have there been any media requests or engagements from our various community organizations that we'd like to share? Yes.
Madam Chair, I had one that came through with the Public Policy Committee with the Platte County Economic Development Council,
Okay.
Which is a subcommittee of that organization. And they asked just to come get a overview of the process and kind of what we're doing. So I plan to do that. That's on October 21st.
Great.
I believe it's at, I have to verify the time, I believe it's at 8 a.m.
Okay. Thank you so much, Commissioner Mike, for that. And we are, we continue to welcome those type of requests and engagement. We are we talked about this culture of accountability. So we're depending and leaning on organizations to be a pathway for information and feedback throughout this process. Any other media requests or engagements?
Madam
Yes.
Chair, I sent you a copy from Kansas City Hispanic News and a copy of an email request to have a conversation with them. And I also, they published the meetings, the public meetings, that'll come out tomorrow in their bilingual newspaper.
Oh, great.
And then third, I sent an email to my fellow Latino-led nonprofit organizations to concentrate on the services that they provide in the traditional 4th District and where the census has taken the demand for services.
Oh,
So that'll be scheduled for next week. I offered them, I think, 4 days to think about.
very good. So will you be able to represent, or do you need any additional
As soon
support?
as I get the feedback and the selected date, I'll get it out to my fellow commissioners.
Okay, thank you. And I'll be sure to follow up to make sure that I'm being responsive. Thank you for that
You're welcome.
reminder. Any other? All right. As we look at our community engagement events, thank you, Commissioner Vicky, for reminding us October the 2nd. That is this coming Saturday from 12 noon to 2 p.m. Thank you to all of our community members that are using their time on Saturdays to keep our neighborhoods clean and safe. So we've made an adjustment on that time. So we'll be from 12 to 2 at the Robert Mohart Center on 3200 Wayne Avenue in the auditorium. You can expect that the staff team, the city staff team, is really working to make sure that we have great sound and support. The commissioners will be there as listeners. And then, of course, we'll be able to lean on the expertise and knowledge of the staff team to even help us communicate the various scenarios. You can also join any and all of these community meetings via Zoom link. We will be sure to put out all the flyers. Beth, can you remind me if the flyers will be also on the webpage now so that people can download them?
Sure, we can make that accessible. We're just finalizing it, and it should be up there first thing tomorrow morning, if not sooner.
Great. So we'll invite you to revisit the webpage tomorrow. The city's done a great job, the communications team, in producing these flyers. So please download them and share them either in print or in social media. And it has all the dates, a QR code, and other information that'll be helpful. That'll be followed by Monday, October the 4th, from 5:30 to 7:30 in Northland Neighborhoods, Inc., at 4420 North Chateau Traffic Way, and we'll be in the community room. Once again, the same information will be shared and disseminated at each of the community events. We just simply want to ensure that they are reasonably located, one in the north, south, and in the central area of Kansas City. The final one will be, or the final of these three, this iteration of our community meetings, will be Wednesday, October 6th from 5:30 to 7:30 at the Southeast Community Center at 4201 East 63rd Street, and that'll be in the gymnasium. This is a reminder that this will be in place of our normal commission redistrict meeting that you will typically find us here on Wednesday. So just a heads up, we won't be here on the 6th at 4 and then there at 5:30. Instead, we will just go there. That would be turbocharged, wouldn't it? So we'll just be there for that meeting. Also wanted to, so any questions or comments about our planned community engagement? Okay. We have had previous engagement requests, one from the Kansas City REI project, where they have requested us to participate in their redistricting informational. It will be virtual. That is October the 12th. And so I would imagine they will be compiling more information. So you'll see representation from this group, making sure that we are honoring not having a quorum in a space. So we'll need to be clear on who from the commission is interested in engaging in that. And we've also been able to enlist the support of Cal, as he'll be able to walk through some of those. And then also on October 22nd, we had a request from Northland Neighbors that preceded our committee meeting, community meeting schedule, and they've asked us to come on the 22nd And so we'll be looking to city staff as well. I think one of the city team members will be joining us for that. So commissioners, my request to you is to confirm who is interested. In light of our sunshine law, it'll be important that no more than 4 of us are assembled in times that are not connected to our official commission meetings. But I do want to open that up so that those that these requests have come from, that more than just their district are represented. So that means at the October 22nd, we want to make sure that those of us that represent up north, that we have some other perspective, along with the October 12th, which is virtual, so that's everywhere, but we can only have 4. Any questions? Okay, so I'll look for you all to follow up with me, or I'll be following up with you to see who's interested. All right, any other questions before I move into feedback that we received from our webpage, and then we'll move into scenarios. All right. First feedback came from zip code 64138. And the request is all maps that are being considered need to be online before public meetings so neighborhoods can look over them in advance. I want to especially point this out because we discussed this at our last commission meeting about wanting to ensure that we're being thoughtful and not creating confusion by posting a lot of maps. Because this was a specific request that counters our decision, I'd like to open it up for more thought. And if there is a particular reinstated rationale to our decision. So, commissioners, any thoughts or responses?
My initial thought would just to be to keep it the way that we have decided to, because we've only got a finite amount of time in these meetings, and so as we open it up to so many more maps, it could get us going this way instead of this way. And so, especially with the public meeting starting this Saturday, I think working from these maps here will give us the best chance to be productive. And then from those 3 maps, those be the ones that go on to the website. I think it helps us be the most productive with our time. And it also will narrow the focus of the public as well. They won't have to go through so many different maps. There will be 3 maps that we are working from, and that should point, I think, the discussion in the best way and keep us all productive. And especially with this shortened period from 9 months to 9 weeks, it's a great suggestion, especially if we had that kind of time. But working within the time frame that we have, I think that this is the best course forward to be productive with our time and try to get a product that everyone can be happy with.
Thank you, Commissioner Martin. Other thoughts?
I definitely agree with Commissioner Rucker, but I also, on the other opposite side, is sometimes I think I'd like to have some feedback before I come to this meeting. And I would hate to be making a decision, sometimes assuming I think what District 6 would want without me actually doing that. So I'm kind of torn between that. I'd like to have the opportunity that if a neighborhood leader would reach out and we're concerned about a certain line or something, that right now, I guess I can't send that to them, which I haven't, by the way. But I'd like to, if that's possible.
Well, and I think it's good for us to have this conversation because I don't know that you can't necessarily share it if you're in conversation, and we have our legal team here to help us with that. But just simply how we post it is another story. So for insight to the community members, there are about 8, we're up to the count of 8, 8+ perhaps, of scenarios that we have been walking through. And what the process is entailing is that we started with our just how it is mapping, and then we went through our conversation on that first meeting, and then the staff team was able to bring back scenarios for us to respond to. From that response, then we have our second iteration. And so, as Commissioner Rucker was stating, that there are so many. And so once we get to the presentation point for those 3, it has been the commission's opinion that those are the ones that will post. So it won't be that none will be posted. It is just simply the process and the timing of when they're posted. But I want to recognize your grapple I really want to be able to get some feedback. And I am under the impression, I'll once again look to other commissioners and our council to advise us that you can communicate and share those as you are gathering opinion about it. So please correct me if I'm wrong. I'm open to,
No, I don't see any impediment to that.
yeah.
Okay, that's fine with me. I just want to be able to share that link if I'm discussing something over the phone with somebody. I have
For them to be able
describe
to
it
see it.
verbally to them instead of just kind of sharing that link. I do understand not putting it up publicly on a website somewhere.
Okay. Thank you. Yes.
Madam Chair, I think that my initial thought on it is we're at a point, I think, where, as I recall, we're going to move forward with 3 scenarios to take to these public meetings. And I think, and while I certainly respect and appreciate the comment that came in, I think we're already there,
Yeah.
essentially, where we're going to start making these public now that we've kind of moved through the process of where we're at now, and then we're going to start working. So, in my opinion, and maybe I'm looking at this differently, but in my opinion, I think we're basically going to, I assume, come out of this meeting ready for this weekend's meeting with some scenarios that are going to be shared public anyways, that we could go ahead and share those specific scenarios on the website, since my understanding is the commission will be at a point where we feel comfortable with 3 scenarios, that those are the 3 scenarios we're going to be working from moving forward.
Yep.
Without major changes. So I would see it as we're kind of going to take care of that.
We're moving towards that.
We're gonna take care of
Absolutely.
that already.
Madam Chair?
Yes. And then Dr. Hill.
I thought what we agreed to was that after the last meeting, when we had 3, or we had 3 before the last meeting based on what we asked Kyle and the staff to come up with. Based on our last meeting, we had more to look at, and I'm not sure we're at a point, unless we are after this meeting today, that we'd be narrowing these down to 3. I think we may want to talk about that in this meeting, because I think there's likely going to be more than 3 to get feedback on. And I thought that was just related to how we started. I don't think we need 17 or anything, but I do think after the last work we've done to see what suggestions resulted in, that we may end up with more than 3 scenarios for the public to take a look at. And if we feel in this meeting that we don't, that there is only 3, that's fine. But I think we ought to keep that open until after we've discussed these.
You know, what I've been hearing and what my understanding has been is that it's circling around that number, that we've agreed that it won't be several different maps that we would share, but around that 3, 4 number is what it is. And then, because to your point, Mike, once we get to the community, that is also what that's the outer face. So I see it more as a delay and not a denial. I also want to note that each commissioner receives the updated folder once it is received and shared from the city. So my commitment is to get those to you at least 24 hours before our meeting, as it takes time for the city staff to get it. So each commissioner has the maps before we come into these meetings. But what I will say, Vicki, to that is, as we continue to move through these, we don't want to limit ourselves to the number of maps, but I think my understanding of the consensus is whatever we're going to show the community will be then what those scenarios are that we'll be working from.
Absolutely. I think I would rather have some feedback from the community before we narrow some of these down to 3 arbitrarily. I think this is where the community
I hear you.
feedback's going to help a lot, because, you know, they're kind of close, but there's big differences between them and different impacts. And I think we could check at the end of the meeting, but I think I'd like to have some more community feedback on the options that we are dealing with.
Which will happen as we move through this next week of feedback, and then we'll have something.
Right.
I'm going to get to Dr. Hill and then Commissioner Adams.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You basically summarized it. It's when do we post and what do we post to the maps. The only thing that I would add as a caution as you're sharing the link, there's a lot of data that we are providing in that link, and everybody doesn't have the same caution when they post them publicly. So I may say, hey, don't post this, but once it's shared with others and others, it becomes something on Facebook. It becomes look at the maps, and those might be maps that don't elevate to the 3 we use in public, or the machinations that we'll go through to get to whichever ones we put there. So I'm asking us to pause on posting anything on the website until we go through, and maybe we decide we wait until we get community feedback to post some. That, I think, what I hear
I'm
from
here.
Commissioner Notas is that maybe that's the part that's up for discussion. Is, when and what gets posted.
Thank you for that.
Well, I kind of tend to agree with Vicky. I like to have as much impact and feedback on everything that we're looking at, but I can find a way to get that without it being posted on the website, But the more information for me, the better, and the more feedback, the better, but also I respect Martin's concerns, and I see what he's talking about. Could create, I guess, a lot of confusion, I guess, for some people, maybe, I don't know.
You all, please be sure to use your microphones. I'm sorry. Thank you very much.
All right.
It sounded like the questioner was just asking if they could see whatever we're going to talk about on Saturday's meeting ahead of time.
No.
No, that's not what they meant?
But can they see these, right?
Right. They wanted to see the scenarios that we all just got yesterday, and I don't,
Right.
that's what I was saying, was I didn't think that was necessary. I think it's these 3 maps that we agree on, that's what's going, so it's,
I don't want to limit this to 3, though.
Right.
That's what I'm saying.
okay. Well, that's fine, I'm just meaning,
Whatever
we
we
didn't need to
should.
get the link we got yesterday, because it's a
Right.
Madam Chair, in all transparency, and to our viewing public, the recordings of these meetings are on, are the YouTube channel too. So if you want to follow us and look at the process of transparency of what we're going through to the viewing public, please look at that video. And you can get to the maps that we're working on, but please trust that we are dealing with data, we are dealing with scenarios that are uncommon for the way our council districts are mapped out today. And our goal is to be transparent and to equalize the total population in each district. So those maps are there. But to avoid the confusion, unless we date, timestamp, and walk away, if whatever we post, please assist us, and your voice will be heard. We want your feedback, but we also need to work through some complex mapping. And once we get those where we're all comfortable as commissioners representing our districts' best interest, we will put them out there, and we will walk away, starting from our public engagement meetings, with your feedback as well.
Thank you for that. I think that's a good reminder, but I also want to pause and rethink this question through the lens that Commissioner Vicky said. It does say before public meetings. It is not clear to me if they're talking about this as a public meeting or an upcoming community meeting. So I just took it as generally public meeting. So thank you all for your feedback. What I'm hearing is that community input is important, that the maps scenarios that we will share with the community as we continue to engage in the in-person community meetings will give us a chance to hear and really gather feedback from there that will then further shape and get us to whatever our scenarios are. And then from there, we'll be able to have some sort of posting that might be helpful. Are we all on the same page with that? I think that's really important. I'm seeing heads nod. Okay. And the second point of feedback came from a community member from zip code 64123. Talks about, I am a 4th District Indian Mound resident since 2004. I've watched every second of the commission meetings. Thank you. So first, I want to thank you all for your hard work. And they said we were very cordial to one another. Isn't that nice? Thank you. I'm writing to implore the commission to keep the neighborhoods of the Northeast whole and in the 4th. Pennington Heights, Scarrett, Renaissance, Indian Mound, North and South, Lincoln's and Sheffield. There are obvious historical significance, similar economic background, and geography. But perhaps most importantly, Drawing Lincoln's and Sheffield out of the 3rd district and into 4th would bolster and solidify the chance of Latino representation, long overdue for our city. Move the 3rd boundary, so this is very prescriptive. Move the 3rd boundary south to at least 12th, east of Benton Boulevard only. Move the 3rd boundary south into the 5th to match the migration of black families. And dissimilar parts of, I don't know what was meant by this, but putting any of the northeast into the 2nd would be devastating to the chances of Latino or working class representation. Splitting the northeast into the 2nd, okay, I just read that. Splitting the northeast and forcing part of it into the 2nd would also crush any chances of proper representation for our communities. So keeping Likens and Sheffield, since census tracts of which are up to 70% Hispanic, in the 3rd pits minority groups against each other. The only way to fairly do this is to move the 3rd south to the 12th and tighten up the sprawl of the 4th. I'll add that Northlanders tried to recall our duly elected 4th District Council person, proof that we have fundamentally different interests here. Note that we rejected their recall effort. Again, excellent work so far. You have already mentioned these suggestions, so I'm simply reiterating this in the fairest path, that this is the fairest path. So thank you so much for your feedback and your reiteration. Any comments or questions? I fumbled through that, so if something didn't make sense, let me know. Yes.
Madam Chair, just one, I guess, clarifying statement.
Mm-hmm.
She mentioned the 4th into the 2nd. I'm assuming that was the 4th into the 1st, because that's the conversation that we've had. Was that 1st would come down, take the northeast? Is that right?
There's a couple of these maps that show that, so I imagine that's probably.
I just
what
wanted to
she was-
clarify amongst the commission that we understood what.
I take it as saying that they don't wanna put that northeast
Yeah.
into the Northland
in the
district.
Northland.
That's the
either,
bottom
either
line.
one or two.
Whatever
Yeah.
number it is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Whether we flipped or flopped it, this response is don't do that. And then our final comment from a community member from 64138. Neighborhood and community coalitions should not be split up into different council districts. So once again, thank you all for your feedback. It is our commitment to listen to that as we are tasked with honoring various and varying opinions. So any other questions or comments or other points of feedback? I did hear directly questions and concerns. I believe there was some sort of news article or news TV platform that talked about the commission making a recommendation to remove all at large. There have been, once again, a reiteration. There's been no decision yet discussion about those things. So just to clarify that to our community members, but we just continue to take your feedback. Commissioner Adams?
Yeah, and the suggestion was that I believe that we asked the council to appoint a charter review commission to look at different scenarios. I don't think we were gonna make a recommendation.
That's right.
One way or the other. But we think that it's clear during this process that if we are really gonna have equitable districts, some of us believe that the city needs to look at that and consider whether or not they should change the configuration.
Yes.
That's what it was. We weren't recommending 12. I personally prefer 12. Some people prefer 9. People have different things. And I think that's not for us to discuss.
That's right.
During this process.
Thank you so much for that clarification. Once again, while it may be part of our discussion, that is not necessarily the scope of this task. However, this commission can choose to place it in a report for consideration by the council. Any other questions or comments, a point of clarification, or anything that you have been, that has been given to you through conversation or otherwise that you want to add to this community feedback column or section?
I'd just like to support the last response you got from the public and what it is going to take this commission to be tasked with to ensure proper representation. And so our report should state that as a finding, that we're already seeing feedback from the public stating that.
Thank you for that. Okay, with that, I will invite Cal, and thank you again. I want to publicly acknowledge Brian and the entire team, and thank you, Cal, for getting all this together. So, Cal?
appreciate those words, and I will say the same thing again. We would not have this information if it wasn't for Mr. Wise over here. He is the individual that is doing the majority of this work. We also have another individual in our office named Tim Esparza who will be helping. Just basically so we have some redundant backup on this stuff. What we provided this time was a little bit overkill, but we wanted to make sure we were showing you guys that we were listening and that we were following your lead on things. So what we provided were the 3 scenarios that everybody talked about. And in your packet, you will find 3 different stacks of things. The first of which will be the hand-drawn maps, which the commission said they wanted versions of this time. So the reason we brought that forward is we wanted to make sure everybody knew what we were working off of. From those, we created scenarios as close as we could based on precinct or block boundaries to represent that, and we added those numbers on there just so we could see what the balances look like. And if you look at those will be the one with just the 4, 5, or 6. In addition to that, we added 4A, 5A, and 6A. And basically what those did was try to respect the boundaries that the commissioners requested as much as we could, but maintaining equal populations in each district and respecting as the census designates it, the Black and African American districts as strongly as we could, and also considering where the Hispanic voting blocks would be as well. In addition to those, we have subtly changed the maps to better represent some of the questions that we are asking. One of the questions is who is impacted by these changes. So it's a little harder to notice unless you're holding the comparable maps to each other. But what we've provided it with the dark blue lines are what the existing council boundaries are. And then the shaded areas represent where changes have occurred, or what is let me rephrase that, where the composition of the new boundaries would be. So those areas where the lines don't show up are the changes. Some of them are dramatic and some of them aren't a great deal either. There's one other map that we did provide, and it's CM2. That's a context map. It's very similar to the population of where the Black and Hispanic populations were, and also the school district map that you guys had asked for information on. This is not a formal scenario that you guys asked for, but as we have constantly been trying to balance out the issue where racial connections with people are, this scenario generally kept popping up. We by no means want to sway the group in thinking, but it was present enough that we wanted to bring it to your attention. So as we're looking through them, that is the nature of that map. Please understand it's just something for your consideration at this time. So we'll go through scenario 4 real quick. And once again, the first information on your stack is the map that we drew. On this one, what this map tried to do was something that Commissioner Adams had asked for, which was to start making sure that Platte County had as much of its population in one district, and they have about 53,000 people, so we needed to gain another 30, give or take, in District 1.
Sorry,
No problem. And we did that as well. We also tried to maintain, as much as we could, the historic boundaries of the 3rd and the 5th district, and keep the 6th district in there as well. When you look at the actual numbers of that one, and I'll zoom in on the screen so people can see it, hopefully. When you look at the number breakdowns of those, they're a little off, but not bad. In addition to that, as I'm zooming in and notice it, we did also include the information based on voting age, or people over 18, and the percentage of their makeup. So with scenario 4, basically it made District 5 a bit small at 72,000 people, and 6 a bit large. It did do a pretty good job of creating 2 strong districts in the 3rd and 5th with the Black or African American vote with 52%, give or take, and 56%. One of the challenges that it did do is it did put the Hispanic population in the 3rd district, so you likely would have some competition for representation there. When we went through and adjusted that map to try to match the equal voting balance in each district, wrong direction. it would be 4A. The numbers get a little better. There we go. Numbers get a little better, and I'll zoom into the numbers. The changes are somewhat subtle.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes, please do.
It's 4A is, but 4A is not, I mean, 4 is not legal, is it? Is that?
Yeah, that's why we
Yeah.
created for
Okay, right, okay, right.
almost.
So I want to reiterate this because excuse me, Cal.
Yeah, go ahead.
I do want to reiterate this that the scenarios that the commissioners are looking at and that were emailed out in the folder yesterday, one is going to honor what was asked. Then there is going to be a revision that helps it be more compliant with our mandate. So just want to be clear. Back to our point about sending all these maps, we don't want anybody to think that this would be anything that we would put
Can I
forward.
ask something there to is it, should they even be producing illegal maps? Should we even be looking at them if they're not? I mean,
Well,
is that something we want to even look at?
The way that's a great question. The way I would frame it is this is what the commission requested.
Okay.
So this is just simply saying this is what you requested, but this is how it would need to. This is the closest we can get to what you requested.
Well, can I throw out there just for future reference that anything that we request should be presumed to be legal, or if it's not legal, don't follow it. I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I don't want to. I mean, I don't. And that goes back to what Martin was talking about earlier. That's really confusing people. We putting out.
Well, we won't.
If we were to put out the maps that were even illegal in the first place.
Yeah, we won't. That's the point.
Okay.
That's why we want to be very clear, and I want to be careful with our language. When we say the map is illegal, it means it does not meet the standard or the mandate that is given. And so I give a natural assumption that what commissioners offer or the scenarios that you all present is with no intent of trying to do any of that. Although we know the impact is what we really care about. But what the mapping team has just been tasked with is just being responsive.
Okay.
So this is a responsive map, and then this is a responsible map. How about that?
Okay.
Thank you, though, for that.
But I would think that they would, that it would be in their best interest and certainly cut down on energy and effort if they would not even produce a map that's outside the 10% differential in.
And if I may, that's our intent going forward.
Okay,
With this set, we just wanted
That's right.
to show some of the subtle differences that were likely to create from this. So yeah, that was something we were going to suggest because while these are all variations of the same one, we had to make 7 different scenarios
That's right.
in order to balance this. It's much better if you guys are comfortable with us taking your line work and making it match as close as we can. That's all this exercise was
right.
attempting to.
Madam Chair, if I
Yes.
could, I would echo that point. That was kind of where my mind was going, in that I think it's important that when we're drawing lines arbitrarily, and I say arbitrarily because we don't know
Right.
when we move those lines how
right.
much population we're moving, and
That's
that's
right.
what's beneficial about staff being able to lay that out and show it to us. So I understand and agree. I don't think we want to spend staff time creating maps that don't provide fruitful content in the meeting. But at this point, I appreciate the fact that we can see how just a minuscule shift in boundary can shift a population or a demographic tremendously. So from that perspective, I appreciate being able to see it at this one, but I also don't want to spend your time because I know you got a lot of things
Yep.
going on, and appreciate that. But I would agree that it's a good practice for you all to just go ahead and take what we meant and put it in its best context.
Thank
So I
you.
appreciate that.
Thank you, Mike.
I didn't explain the 10% rule in our opening remarks, but for benefit of people listening in with Zoom, could you just run over that real quick so people know what we're talking about?
Yeah, please. Vicki, you can go ahead and complete your thought. Thank you.
Sure, you do.
At 10%.
Oh, you want me to do it? Okay. No, it has to be within 10% in Cal.
The largest to the smallest.
That's right, the largest to the smallest, and that helps us bring it all together and keep it intact. And so what I'm hearing is that that this exercise I believe this is a beneficial exercise for us, especially those that have never done this before, to understand what those small tweaks, how it shifts, can shift large numbers. And I think it was important for us to see that. But I'm hearing this release to the city staff to be able to just make those adjustments. Yes, Commissioner.
Totally agree. I think this is why we have the conversation about what's permissible to share and sending the link, right? This is an example of, yeah, this is super helpful for me. I agree. Don't produce a map that's, don't want to waste your time. But for me, it's like, okay, this is what we asked for, but this is the reason why it won't work.
That's it.
Because when we go through the process, people will say, oh, Kokithia, just ask them to shift this up. And having this review allows me to understand, yeah, if we did, we would not be in compliance with our standards around redistricting. But if we're tight on what is shared publicly on the website or who we send things to, and I think it allows us to get into place. At least we would be able to flag it, because I wouldn't have been able to be thoughtful
That's
to
right.
flag it if I shared it to someone else. To Mr. Adams' point, then we'll have people saying, oh, they're doing things that are illegal, and that's not the intention. So I agree, just.
Thank you for honoring this exercise.
Thank you.
Thank you. Cal, thank you for allowing us to interrupt you.
Sure, no worries. So this is 4A, and likely after this meeting, we'll take the A off of it. We'll get rid of the initial 4, and this will be the official map as long as it's okay with, or official scenario 4 as long as the group is okay with it. What the numbers come out to once we corrected some of those lines or modified the lines to comply a little better was 83,000, 83,000, 85, 85. Sorry, I'm moving away from the mic. 85 and 84,000. Pretty good balance from that, and I'll zoom out here in a second for those people that are joining us online. It also does a pretty good job with once again, the strengths of the 3rd and 5th districts. They're at roughly 52 and 57, pretty strong, but it does continue to have the challenge, even with some of the modest corrections in there, of 22% of the Hispanic vote also in the 3rd district. So I'll zoom out real quick so the public can see the map again. And with that, I'll yield on scenario 4A, for any comments, or I can move forward.
I just have a question, if you know. I can't see, and I don't have a magnifying glass. What's that northern boundary of the 3rd district? The one in the middle before the zigzag? Or just tell me all the boundaries, all the northland boundaries, the north boundaries of the 3rd district.
So
Furthest
as we're
north.
zoomed in here, if you'll look on this
See that street?
on the
it's
street,
Independence
this is
Avenue.
Independence.
It's Independence, okay.
That's the
That's on to the east, to the west, that's Independence,
yeah.
right? And then, getting the one further, what's that? Is that 12th or Truman Road or?
So I
It's
can't-
all Independence Avenue. If
All
you,
that's Independence Avenue,
So if you're
okay.
looking at the blue line,
I follow you.
if you're looking at the blue line, that's the existing,
Okay.
and
No, I'm talking about the green up there, the green
okay,
up
yeah,
there,
that's
that green.
Independence Avenue
Okay,
is
yeah.
the northern boundary
The
between
green, okay,
4 and 3.
okay. Thank you.
What's the western boundary, or, or eastern boundary, sorry. Eastern boundary coming from the 4th down to the 5th, down to the 6th. I mean, is it Truce?
I think it's Truth there.
Hardesty.
Truth didn't go to Paseo, I think. Right?
And it kind of, I know in the 4th and 5th.
See that red
they're
dot?
the
See
3rd.
that red dot there, the
Right.
north, that's where Melissa Robinson lives. And
So
that's east of Truth.
It's Harrison, where the 4th district and the 6th district meet, and then as that continues down, it converts into Troost, and then it bumps over at 87th Street to Holmes.
I'm talking further north, further north in the 3rd district, what is it down there?
Further north in the 3rd,
Is that Paseo, or is that?
to be honest with you, I can't tell either. I'd have to
I
pull
think
up.
one is Truth, another is Paseo, I think, I'm not
It's
sure.
2 blocks over from
Truth, or is it home?
Harrison, I believe.
Harrison?
Yep.
Okay.
Feedback, questions, concerns, once again, wanting to lift up. Thank you, Cal. You've illuminated what has changed physically, but also us being thoughtful about who is impacted, for better or for worse. So thoughts?
I have another question, if you don't mind.
Please.
With the 2nd district, with all the blue, is that what my request was, with that, put all the Platte and then the rest of Clay that you need to make that?
Yes.
What that blue is, all that blue is the rest of Clay?
Yeah, just as we go forward, Platte County, and we're looking north of the river right here. This orange line is basically the Clay Platte County
Okay.
border. And if you're just looking at the shape too, it's also this hard line right on the side of Riverside. It continues straight up for the most part.
Okay.
What's the southern east-west boundary on the 4th district? That separates the 4th and the 6th?
4th and 6th, I believe, is 43rd Street.
That's right.
Yep.
Okay. That puts the plaza into the 6th district.
What about, is 43rd, I'm trying to picture that, is it north or south of Westport?
North.
South.
South.
South, so it doesn't include, so the Westport says 4th district, okay.
Right.
And then what about the, down here, in between the 5th, the north-south border between the 6th and the 5th, kind of down there by Cerner? What is that boundary?
Brian, if you don't mind, as I'm looking, if you have some information, please feel free to share.
Okay.
5th and 6th is 435.
435,
What's this?
What's the east-west boundary?
like it's 71.
So 5th and 6th is 435, and I'm just saying what you said into the mic, Brian.
71.
And what's that east-west boundary there, that street that divides the 5th and the 6th?
Oh, sorry, yeah, it is 435.
Looks like
And
Harrison.
470.
Okay, I mean, I guess the north, the one that,
So that one-
this right here, you know, I know what that- what is it?
I'm trying to figure that out.
Is that Warnell or
He's asking
Harrison?
for the north-south.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah, the one below that.
So it'd be this boundary right there.
Yeah.
You familiar with what that one happened to be, Brian?
I feel like I could.
He's looking it up as we go.
Okay.
This is Martha Truman?
Hillcrest to Hickman Mills Drive.
Hillcrest?
Hillcrest to Hickman Mills.
Okay.
Okay.
And then my
That's a good
last
dividing
question
line.
is, I just wanted to see a scenario,
What do you think about
like how that would affect if the border between 5th and 6th was truced the whole way down? Or at least until truce deaded end?
All the way down to what?
Well, I guess is it truce dead ends in the 95th Street or Bannister?
Yeah, I think so.
Is that 6?
You know, I can't, it just seems odd that it jets over there, but,
So what it's doing in that situation is it's following the precinct boundary.
Mm-hmm.
oh,
So that's why some of the boundaries are slightly different. We can't manipulate those lines because they have to hit some of the pre-existing
You
boundaries.
can't divide precincts, that's just be a nightmare for the election board.
Right. Good question, thank you.
That's a good point of clarification.
Yeah.
We mention those things, and then when we work on them, we just, that's one of those things that usually kind of falls through. So anytime questions like that, let us know. All of these lines do follow a hard boundary by a precinct boundary or a block boundary.
okay.
I'd like to hear some feedback on the, we're gonna discuss it, of the pros and cons from the, since I'll make that suggestion, what are the pros and cons from the Northland about that configuration up north?
I don't,
Another question is Briarcliff stays in the 4th here, right? Is it
It's in the
Briarcliff
second.
is in the second in
the
this one.
second, that blue part over there, Briarcliff? that's-
It does, on this one, it drops down past I-29, and Briarcliff
Goes back to the second.
goes into the second district.
And this is,
I've heard some feedback about people that wanted that. I didn't know.
yeah, no, this is pretty close. My real big issue with this one would be that I don't think it increases the opportunity for Hispanic representation. I think it just creates competition between Hispanic and African Americans. So this map here, though, is pretty close. I think with a couple of tweaks to where I feel that I would like to be. And I can save my comments until we go through all the maps, but this one here is pretty close.
Mike, and I'm gonna respond to your point about the Latino. I think one of the problems is that because of the geography of where, I think of where the census tracts show they live,
Sure.
it's down around 23rd Street topping area over in there. And you can't, you take that out,
Well, you said you were,
part of the black community.
I think you said you were okay with going down to Truman Road, weren't you?
No, 12th Street, I think it said.
12th Street?
Yeah.
Okay.
12th
I
being
don't
it.
wanna take 12th Street out of,
18.
Right.
some institutions in 12th Street out of 3rd District. So 12th Street is my.
That boundary.
Boundary. You bring it all the way down. You certainly can't bring it all the way down to 23rd Street, you know, that would-
18th Street.
and to capture Latinos into the 4th, you have to do that. But they live over in that topping, you know where?
No, I know what you're talking about.
Topping, Blue Valley Park area over there.
Yeah, I think we just need to go a little bit further south of Independence Avenue.
Okay,
Yeah.
we're okay with 12th Street. I mean, I think you know, from my feedback from talking to people in the community, we're okay with coming all the way down, let 12th Street be the boundary.
Yep. Nope. That's
Yeah,
again.
I'm totally okay with that. If that would help,
This map here.
if that would help over there, we certainly have no problem.
Yeah, this map here, I don't have very many. I just have a couple suggestions on some tweaks, and I was gonna just let Kyle go through kind of all the scenarios and then talk about the points that I had and see if anybody else agreed with those. So, but this is good. This is a really good starting place, and this is actually the map that I've got my comments on. So this is a good map, Quinn.
Madam Chair, if
Yeah,
I could.
please.
I would echo, and thank you, Commissioner Adams, for asking for the input on kind of what our thoughts are from a Northland perspective. I would echo what Commissioner Rucker said. I think there's just a few minor tweaks. And again, to the conversation we just had, it appears as though the CM2 map districts 3 and the majority of the way 4 is laid out, superimposed into 4A, would achieve, I think, what all of us are talking about, based on what I looked at earlier. We can dig into that later, but since you asked the comment, I wanted to make sure that I respected your request, and I think that's between those two, based on some comments that we've got from others on the commission, from our southern districts, it seems as though this one has some really good foundations. Now, I think there's a lot of discussion still to be had. I'm not saying that we're done. I'm just saying that we're I think heading in a positive direction with these.
Other thoughts? Please know that we will do both and, meaning if you want to pause here and make some particular pieces, notes or comments, we can do that. And then, of course, at the end, have a cumulative discussion to your point. Vicky?
I have a question on 4A and CM2. What is determining the east line of the section of 4 that's north of the river and south of Gladstone, where it intersects with District 1? Why did we draw that line there? What drives that info?
Vicky, if I'm so south of I-29 to, if you can show me on your map,
It's the old district.
How'd you get that?
on 4A, okay.
Here.
So what we're looking at is on the map on the screen, why we pushed the boundary over to this area, and it really was chasing population.
The eastern boundary of the 4th of North.
Yeah, so this is Shoto Traffic Way. It comes up through there. This is yeah, thank you, Brian.
Could you say that again? I'm sorry.
Norman and Antioch.
Norman in Antioch.
So
North End.
Norton.
Norton.
So if you'll look at the screen, this is Antioch, this is Vivian, this is Norton, and then it follows 29 or 35. Apologize, and then Shoto Traffic Way on the way down.
Say it again on the, next to Gladstone.
Next to Gladstone, this is Antioch. So those familiar with Antioch Shopping Center, it's actually this area right there. Drops down, it hits Vivian Road. This is Norton. And then this line here is I-35. And then this is Shoto Traffic Way as it goes down.
Does that make sense to Northland neighborhoods in that area?
I haven't gotten any feedback otherwise. I think following the guidance of staff based on existing
They're
precinct boundaries and other things of that nature, I think that's something that's certainly plausible.
And I think we'd even be okay with it just going straight up to the Gladstone edge, catching, instead of that cutout at Antioch, you could take it all the way over to, I guess that's in Norton. And just draw it straight down, which makes it a little more compact, maybe, or maybe not compact, but contiguous.
I'm curious of what that population is. Yeah, that must be-
If he had that information.
Yeah,
Can you give us the Platte County, Clay Jackson County breakdown on the fourth?
thank you, Brian.
And there's again, got comments
I
for
mean,
the
the
end. We
Jackson
can
County.
run through all of the scenarios and then get to this, but there's a piece on the northern portion of Gladstone on the east side where we could possibly swap those pieces. So you cut that purple piece out there and make the bottom piece green.
So I believe what Commissioner Rucker is suggesting is to basically this area here, which is Berry Road, and I'm not even going to attempt to tell you what neighborhood street that is over, but it's the area that's highlighted in purple there, and this area over, and see if the population's balanced enough
Right.
to create cleaner lines.
But can we ask, does he have it now, what the Jackson,
Could you repeat the question real quick?
what's the population in the fourth district? And how much is in Jackson? What's the population in Jackson? And what's the population in, I guess that's Clay?
Yeah, that would be
That's
Clay.
Clay.
So fourth right now is split between,
Okay, that might take a second.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll look it up though.
so that actually requires us to open up the bigger software package. We can get it.
With all those, the stuff you gave us with all the, okay.
It wouldn't actually be in that. We would have to actually go back and select the area. We can
Okay.
do that,
okay,
just not on
okay.
the fly.
Okay.
And if that's something we think we want for any district that is divided amongst that, we'll make sure we have that at future meetings. But that
Commissioner-
unfortunately is not one that we can provide.
Commissioner Adams, can you give me more for that question? Can you talk about what's your understanding or
I just
intent?
want to know what the population split between the part that's north of the river and south of the river.
Oh, okay. Just
With-
blanketly.
in the fourth district. This the only one, in this map, this is the only one that straddles the river. And the other scenarios, I would like to have it for each of the maps where the Northland district drop down or the Southland district goes up. I can know the population
Yeah.
difference in both. of those.
Scenario 5, we'll do the same thing.
We'll
as
drop
well.
it.
So we won't be able to give it to you tonight, but we can
As soon as you can, you
we
know.
can get it to you
Yeah.
pretty quick.
Okay. Dr. Hill, did I see? Okay. Other thoughts? Pedro, did you have a?
No, I think I'm at a point where I'll just wait and continue to
Okay.
gather information on
All right.
as we go through the maps.
So with,
Say,
go ahead, please.
I mean, with the request that I think Commissioner Adams is making too, if you compare 4A and the context map, I'd be curious to know the population of the areas where it's splitting green and purple right now, and what that would do to a 4A1 map and how it would, you know.
What point is that you're talking about?
Well, so, I mean, the area that Martin was just talking about, I mean, those
Oh, okay.
areas there
Uh-huh.
and how that would shape up and then how that plays out between the fourth and the one there is all.
Right.
And I guess the other point that I would ask is, I don't have an easy solution for this, but I'd like to see, and I think Chris mentioned it last week, I'd like to see how, if, on any of the maps that we can do, if we can have the sixth as it currently is sitting, with that north, or east-west, with having both legs in the sixth, and I realize that probably is very tough, but I'd be curious to know just what happens with the population, and I guess in looking at 4A, maybe my request would be what the population is of the area that's south of the current fifth.
You want to keep both boots in the sixth. the current
I'm
district.
not
mean,
saying I want
suggesting,
I'm just
okay.
asking what that
Right,
would
I
look
understand.
like. Ultimately, and echoing what Chris said last week, I'd like to see a map that has the ability for community members to have input on that east-west line as it currently sits versus the north-south divide that's kind of in, it's west of Ruskin basically right now, I think on a lot of these.
And is that scenario like 4 or something? Scenario 3? The map with the least amount of change, was that,
That was
that keep
some,
both boots together?
I'd have to pull it up
Yeah, I don't remember.
and look. Honestly, what you're likely going to run into a challenge with there is maintaining strong percentages in the third and fifth districts of the African American and Black vote. Whenever we
I hear
balance those things, I don't know that we've tried one that does exactly what you've asked for, but when we've played with numbers where they're generally allocated, I assume what will come back, that will be
I
the
hear you.
pinch point.
I want to be able to explain that.
Yeah,
though,
no,
as
no
well.
Yeah.
problem. We'll do that.
And I'd like to suggest maybe looking at some of those census tracts, I think down there around, and that, if you put all of that Hickman and Ruskin area, if you move that fence boundaries down further south, but don't take it all the way down into the boot, that you might pay to pick up more. You still keep a sliver there. I don't know what street that is. I can't read these things here.
Yeah.
You keep, if you draw the, see what I'm talking about here?
Yeah,
If they draw the line there, maybe.
maybe,
There's enough population here.
maybe.
I don't know.
Yeah, I want to be able to explain that, the
I
reason.
think you could also move the boundary that, I guess it would be the western boundary of the fifth that crosses over Truce, move that back over to Truce. It might not pick up a lot, but I think you can push that eastern to Truce and then come down a little bit lower. That might save, the boot in the sixth, but I don't think there's many people.
Madam
Swing
Chair, can I make a recommendation that we go
Move
through the
through.
remaining matters?
Mhm.
And, we chopped up for I think if we go down and look at 2 and 1, I think we may get closer to what we're all talking.
Okay, thank you for that. Thank you.
Kinda like 4A.
As we ensure we maintain, I think, yeah, four sounds like it might be something for most. But let's go ahead and move to 5A. Once again, we're gonna go directly to the amended maps. We'll skip over now that we understand the purpose of the exercise. So can we talk through 5A?
We certainly can. We are looking at 5A. This was one of the additional scenarios we looked at. This one actually allows both the 4th District and the 1st District to straddle the river. So you have two portions of two districts in two different counties. Actually, 4th is in 3 counties in this scenario. We also respected Commissioner Adams' request to try to maintain as much of Platte County in the 2nd District as we could. However, there is a small piece to make the numbers work that did from Platte County that did get pushed into District 4. And the reason that is because as we progressed to the south, the populations of those districts were of the size that they needed to change.
Seems like it also puts Briarcliff, leaves Briarcliff in the 4th, right?
Correct. So Briarcliff is in the 4th District as it goes forward. Let me zoom in on the composition of our numbers.
And I'll we always want to be mindful of who's impacted and or for better for worse, but I'll also, just as we kind of move through it so we can get to our comments and shaping, is there anything that you, as you think about our communities, that you want to uplift or lift up in here that we like, and some key things that that go against that, just so we can acknowledge it?
Madam Chair, I would just state that it doesn't provide an equitable distribution for the Latino votes at any district.
Mm-hmm.
As this is demonstrating in the numbers and how it's in the representation of a 4th District representative who has that urban mindset of representing urban mindset, and to try to straddle both, it's going to be difficult.
Yeah, I agree. Other acknowledgements?
I would just echo exactly what Pedro says.
Yep. Vicky?
I have a question that came up last time about the Hispanic vote in District 1 north of the river that somebody said was significant and growing. I couldn't figure it out from the information, the way it's divided up. Is there a way to tell that?
So one of the best tools that we have on hand right now would be to look at the map on the right of the screen here that shows you where the populations, and this is Hispanic by percent. Mm-hmm. We also have the one by absolute, and you can see where that falls. Oops, scanned the wrong way. Let me zoom into it, and that's why we produce these maps. So once again, the darker red to orange, that's going to tell you where you have a higher population or higher percentage in those individual boundaries of Hispanic population.
Can you zoom in to the west side? Yeah. That's what I was.
where you looking at, Vicky? On the west side of that district or
No, on
the west side neighborhood?
on the traditional west side neighborhood. That's,
That's a result of
significantly less than I
gentrification.
thought it was.
It's a result of gentrification.
Right.
And it's also a result of not having representation on the city council to
I
represent
don't
our.
disagree with that. What I'm trying to figure out is whether, because that has happened, it's pushed more into Old Northeast and more just north of there across the river, which is what,
That's where it is.
to see if that comes out about the same, is what I'm asking.
Yeah, it's, it looked like it's, matter of fact, it's more, it's 16%
All right.
in the first district and only 10.5% in the fourth district.
Right.
Well,
I
what's-
got about 10 to
Oh, no,
11.
I'm looking at over 18, I guess is what I'm looking at.
Well, I got 10 to 11% when I figured it out on all of them on the west side, and the majority was in northeast and then,
I'm looking at the over
North.
18 population.
so I was just trying to figure out that the bulk of that is in northeast.
And we also could consider eligible to vote as a criteria there. I mean, we
Okay.
see the immigrant population that traditionally hasn't voted, and we still have the political base on the west side and a growing political base on the northeast that reflects the Latino population and the growth. And there is a migration up north for better schools and better job opportunities.
Well, it looks like it's impossible to consolidate those.
That's, well, this is the crux of the problem, and it's probably going to be throughout, but trying to look to the future, my thoughts about having at least 2 districts cover or straddle the river gives you more influence with possibly 4 council people for the same issues. And in some of these cases, possibly 6, until you, so we can track the movement until you get to a point where you have a majority in any district, which we don't have now. So, that's what I'm trying to figure out, is if, you know, that, I know it's easy to look at the history and at our old enclaves, which we need to be careful about, but as our Northland commissioners have mentioned, their population is growing, so is their minority population. And so to keep that as a front and center issue for our other districts, besides just 4's issue, I still think it's worth looking at from that perspective.
Well, what I'm hearing is that 6A, just,
5A.
yeah, 5A, thank you. 5A disrupts the now and the tomorrow in some ways for that, with cutting out this particular northeast piece like 4A or even the CM2 offers.
In Old Northeast?
Well, this piece, this on 5A, that is now 1, which is different, District 1, which was different than how it shows up in 4A and in the CM2. So just simply responding to the fact that you have this loss that I'm hearing, Pedro, you speak to. And so if, you know, if the question is, what is it that we like or what is it that we want to acknowledge as a caution on these, that is what I'm acknowledging as a caution. So I was just trying to connect it to what you were saying so I can make sure I'm understanding.
I'm just looking at it from a different angle in terms of what's probably going to happen as we move forward in the future, and that there's less than the perception there is on the west side, and more than the perception is north of the river. And that, you know, perceptions,
There are more Latinos, according to these data, at least over 18, in the third district and in the first district than in the fourth district.
that's, yeah.
And so, but how do you consolidate that? I think it's impossible. I mean, it looks like to me.
Well, I would just say that looking at map 4A and even CM2, if you look at that map there on the right, the 4th district captures both of those.
Right.
And so that appears as though it gives the best opportunity for representation for Hispanics in the
For
here and in
In
the
the-
future.
Capture
It's just what I would,
both of what?
well,
Latino.
can you see the screen there?
No, it's behind.
Be over your.
See right
There's
there,
one
It's
over
over
your
your
right
shoulder.
shoulder as
See that
well.
red, that orange,
You articulated that, Martin, better than I. That's what I was just saying.
Right.
You don't get the part that's not in the first, you don't get the other
That's-
15.
So
That
I
is
think
my
that
point,
gives them
is
the
that that's what
best
seems-
opportunity for representation. And then if you can zoom in there, Kyle, just north of the river, on the east side just a little bit. Right in there, that's where you see where it's not orange, meaning there are no Hispanics. It's starting to get redder, and there's some that are fairly red. There's a block in there that's fairly red as well. And so if you're going to pick up the opportunity, and again, Pedro, don't let me step on anything or say anything that's incorrect, but I feel like that area in there, coupled with what's on 4A or CM2, that is the bulk of the Hispanic population in the city. That's also where they're growing. I was just at North Kansas City High School. They speak over 121 languages. And so not only does that include Hispanic languages, but I feel like minorities would have a better inclination to vote for another minority, whether they're Hispanic or not
That's-
as well, which I think would increase the opportunity for a Hispanic
That's
candidate.
my point.
Okay.
is
So I
that
guess we're saying the same
For
thing.
1 and 2, eventually, for the city to get less segregated, and as people move, just as like 40 years ago, people were moving from the 3rd into the 5th district and 6th district, that if there's movement across the river to more than just a majority white population, that this would be an opportunity to
I hear you.
to pay attention to that as we move through the next 10 years. And if it
My
means we
concern
have
is-
to trade off some for another, then, I mean, it doesn't seem logical, but to me, if we have to look at specific numbers, but your point, Martin, about North Kansas City's distribution, which is good, says to me that the minority population is growing north of the river. I think it has been over time.
In the immediate, I think splitting those districts like that would dilute it so much.
That's
And
right.
I don't think it's going to get there in 10 years. That would be.
I don't think it's going to get there now. I don't think the
We're just looking for the
population's big
best
enough
scenario,
now.
and you may be right that it may not get there, but this gives them
Four
the best.
I want to.
four is so chopped up, nobody's going to have a basis of operation the way
Hey.
these are.
Pedro, do you have a thought about this before we transition?
You know, I'm listening to both. We can't predict the future, and it's a politician and it's a candidate that's going to have to win the seats, not just the demographic that's going to be voting. It gives us a better chance. And listening to the feedback that we've already had about keeping the residential component of the 4th district on the northeast community intact. And I think that's part of our listening. The industrial piece of coming across the south end of the river, for the first, what's gained there, future development opportunities, minimal growth. I think we've looked at census data that shows minimal Latinos in that lower northern part by the river. But we do know there's a growth in the older sections of North Kansas City, the north of the river, and predominantly LMI immigrants that are settling there. But organizing, providing social services to them is going to be key, and getting ultimately representation on the council's key as well. And so it's difficult to talk about taking Northeast out of what's an existing well-served community of Latinos and other immigrants and refugees.
I see merit in both approaches, I guess, and I guess what I'd like to have is some feedback from, I heard from Martin, but from the other Northlander about from Martin too, just in general. What's your reaction to having more than one district straddle the river? One of the things that I liked about Vicky's suggestion when she initially made it last meeting or the meeting before was that we kind of, by doing that, don't we kind of remove the river as a, like as a barrier or as a border, you know, we kind of erase the river like and, to stop talking about Northland, Southland? Doesn't that have some kind of long-term benefit for the city and city relations to have more than one district straddling? Or do you all like the fact that just have, you know, 2 complete districts north of the river and then the 4th straddling?
Well, Commissioner Adams, I thank you for the question. I think that the 4th is achieving that
By itself.
bridge.
Not just one district, though, just one.
No, I understand, and I think that the dynamic is what we're talking about is the challenge with the demographics. I think that the minority growth in the Northland is a direct, in direct relation to the amount of growth that's taking place in the Northland, and I think that currently the conversation that we're having is only going to increase as we get into 2030 in a census, where we see population trends and growth. I think, to Vicky's point, I think as we look into the future, the 4th only has one place to go, in my opinion, and that's north. So
We're going 3 places, so that's what I'm trying to get at. is
yeah,
as the
and I'm just looking at
population is
what's the
growing,
least
The Northland is really
impactful.
growing.
And I think
the 4th district
to
is really
Pedro's
growing.
point, if you were to maintain it in the 4th, it's the least impactful from a negative as far as voting, and I think that gives the opportunity for the Hispanic population to potentially have the best chance, which is what I think we're all trying to achieve. So I don't necessarily see the river as a boundary per se, other than because the 4th is already straddling it. There's already a connection between the north and south. It's only going to continue to.
Well, there is a boundary on these maps. There's a boundary, and more importantly, my point is, it's a barrier. I mean, you know, it has a negative connotation to it, and if we kind of remove that by having,
I guess it
you know,
doesn't
we
in my
start looking
mind.
at Northland, Southland, we're looking at, you know, the 1st district, and you know, hopefully, with people that somebody in the old Northeast could maybe run in the 1st district and maybe win in district, but certainly could maybe run in district and win at large. You know, but if we, as long as we keep that river as a barrier, you know, go back to the whole thing with Scott Wagner. When Scott Wagner wanted to run, he felt that he had to move north of the river to be able to run. That he could, although he lived in the district, he had to live in the north part of the district in order to have a chance to win. So he moved, you know, and
Well, I think.
I'd like to get away from that kind of stuff, you know what I mean?
Well, I can tell you that I don't know that the river is necessarily shared as a natural, or as a boundary of sorts in the terms that you're using it. Now, historically, was it? Potentially, yes. I think that's changed though over the last 10 years, and you can see that in the growth and the way that the population growth and just the conversation that we're having tonight around who's moving into the Northland and who's, I mean, everyone is trying to achieve the same thing here. So I guess I would say that I think we heard from public comment and concerns regarding moving the 1st district down across the river was a concern. I think Pedro is sharing the same concern. I want to respect those, and I just don't necessarily see the ultimate benefit of doing that at this point in time, given the way the demographics lay out and the opportunity that it could or would not give.
Well,
there's
before
another
I wanna-
couple of issues about 4 that I've maybe should raise after we've been through all of these. 4 is losing a lot of neighborhoods, older neighborhoods, affordable housing neighborhoods, and they're going to end up in 6, no matter what we do. And if we move the boundary up to Westport, then we have downtown, which is growing in terms of population. They're not they're probably more transitory with thousands of apartments than they are with home ownership around the rest of the city. And I think the dynamics between who's going to be in 4 this next time is going to upend everything for who can run for council. There's not enough up north to probably support one. There's maybe enough, but I don't think so yet, to support both sides of the Hispanic community, which makes the most sense to connect. I don't think that's going to get us any more than looking at something a little bit out of the box. But, I mean, we'd have to look at the numbers. I understand what everybody's saying. But 4 is taking on, you know, just a huge difference in content, boundaries, neighborhoods, And I think we need to pay attention that if those two council people are also the only two whose boundaries cross the river, that changes the political dynamics as well.
So I'm going to say this because I do want to make sure we get to 6A and then also the CM2. Because I appreciate the vision that you're inspiring of getting all of us thinking about that and getting curious about the future and how we can continue to nurture and cultivate that. And maybe it takes 10 or other. But my concern is to whose expense, and what we hear and what I mean, as a black woman who lives up north, I too want to see representation. I think Commissioner Adams, you started our first meeting saying that, and so I would be concerned as to who would be at the expense of really trying to nurture that vision in this iteration of redistricting. But I appreciate all of the comments. I want to get us to 6A and to CM2. Once again, we'll be able to revisit and add more comments as we move forward.
No, I appreciate that, and I thank you for the opportunity. I appreciate the feedback from the Northlanders, because
Yeah.
that's what I was curious about, is to what the concerns were about having more than one district rather, so it's good to hear.
And thank you for saying that. I think that some of the real issues that create the barriers, not just the boundaries to up north, is some of the cultural pieces that we're talking about, which I don't necessarily think that's indicative of the river or not, but just some of the other pieces that, for me, Vicki, what you were talking about helps us begin to navigate that, meaning who has historically and traditionally represented, Districts 1 and District 2. How have we changed our mind about who lives up north? Because there are many people, even when we look at our statistics, people of color, because while we've been focusing mainly on this large Hispanic column and, of course, our black column, we still have columns that add up of 2 or more races and other races that I want to bring consideration to and representation of as well, that when we begin to add up those numbers, we can then begin to and I don't even want to say rename, but expand the narrative of who is up north, who are the Northlanders, because I think that is a much broader perspective or image than the current narrative that we have about who's a Northlander.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I don't want to belabor the point. I know you're moving on, but I do want to just add my voice in
Yes.
support of Pedro with thinking about keeping the communities, the Hispanic communities together in the fourth. As we've been
Absolutely.
talking about this, I know we're thinking about the future, but I want to keep reiterating the recommendation of the charter review, at that point, because I think we're going to get to this piece, as Vicki has said, about population trends and shift. What does that look like for representation in terms of our current configuration? I also want to name that this artificial boundary rule or perceived about the river, we had the opportunity to address that when Mr. Adams talked about the horizontal 152. And we listened to the Northland to say, hey, you know what? That doesn't bode well for us. So I just want to make sure we're listening to Pedro at this moment when he's saying, hey, keeping our communities together. So
That's right.
that's
You
what
are
I
not
wanted to
alone.
add.
Yeah, thank you for that.
That's a good point.
Thank you for that. Hopefully that was heard during my comments as well. Cal, 6A?
So, appreciate it, everyone. We're going to move straight to 6A. 6A, I believe Ms. Notice provided us with this one. It was generally represented by this one. This one suggested, once again, that we straddle the river with 2 districts. It also wants to make sure that we can maintain as many of the school districts together as we can. So it does a good job of that in the north and in the south areas. I'm going to zoom in to the boundaries. It's one of the more, it creates 2 as maybe a little more discontiguous as some of the other ones, but it does make many of the other districts a little more compact. So when we balanced it out, it did quite a few good things, and it also, as you'll look at the numbers, it had some things that created some challenge. We were able to bring the numbers within compliance on just overall percentages of individuals or population in the districts. When you start to look at the percentages of the individuals who are making up those districts, 3rd and 5th, the Black or African American percentage did go down, It also did put them in pretty sharp in pretty sharp conflict or competition with the Hispanic vote in the 3rd district. It also keeps the majority, or not a majority, but another big number of the Hispanic vote at 16% up in the 1st district. Not as high as we would like it, but it does separate it again. With that, those are probably the most notable things on that map. Vicki, I don't know if there's anything you wanted to add on thoughts on putting that one together.
No, I was actually thinking most about 5 and 6 in this one. That eventually, instead of this kind of crazy double boot thing we've had for a long time, that if we made 5 just more compact and 6 just come all the way down, which is what it used to do, that it just seems, and keep the school district lines that people think are important, they just want them in one or the other, not, at least that's what I heard. But I think, aside from the issues we've all been discussing, north of this, that I'd just like to hear what people from 5 and 6 think of this, if we can hang on to this part when we're still messing around with the rest of it.
Well, I'm not from 5 or 6, but I'm gonna talk for.
I'll be next.
Go ahead.
It just makes 5, I mean,
Yes.
that 48% African-American population in 5 is totally unacceptable. 48% black and 40% white, that is not a safe district, it does not protect the minority rights, voting rights in that district.
Is there not a
in
way
my
to
view.
do
So
that?
that was,
It's
that
not
was very
coming all the way
problematic for
over.
me.
If there's not a way to do that, which I didn't have any way of knowing when I
Okay.
suggested.
Yeah.
That was jumped out to me before anything else. And then the 6th district coming all the way, 6th district going so far east to Truce.
Yes.
So, I mean, those would be issues in our community, I mean,
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, so that, it was
I think
it was
mine,
my least, likable.
She's gonna let you
district.
speak.
Oh, yeah, and Mr. Adams, I know I'm gonna get on your
Sorry,
nerves, but
Sorry.
please.
I'm trying to be
Thank
comfortable.
you.
I
Thanks,
think
man.
what I was looking at was to see if we could keep Troost, the dividing line, which made
Oh,
5
okay.
much better.
Okay.
And then I don't know what that, I mean, I think we might even have to angle this a little bit, but that was my question, was if we
Well,
could keep Troost.
It was my least favorite map, I put it
Well,
that way.
I wanna toss it over to 5th and 6th. So Dr. Hill, and then Chris and Reed.
Well, I agree with the sentiments that Commissioner Adams raised. I mean, I think keeping that truce as, not get confused, the western boundary for 5th would be key and important. I think that maybe, I understand 6 wanting to come down and to stay compact, and it still loses the boot, if we call it the boot. So, and also it reduces the African-American voting power in the 5th. So for all the points that he has already spoken on behalf of a 5th
Sorry
district,
about that.
that's all good.
Teamwork. That's teamwork.
It works, but yeah.
Okay, Chris.
I like map number 4 scenario in the 6th district better than I do on this
Yeah.
current one we're doing. But I do, once again, I just like these different scenarios because it makes me feel even more confident on maybe something like map 4. I maybe wouldn't feel as confident if I didn't see scenarios like this. So I do appreciate the ideas from the commission on just a whole bunch of different scenarios because it shows that we're thinking outside the box.
Is it not possible to do 5 and 6 the way we have it in 4A as we're doing it in 6A? Because the original drawing did not go east of Truce, but is there no way to make that happen over here? It looks like you could.
That was gonna kind of be my question, was what the population numbers look like, and
In there.
If
to get
that
something like that.
went over here, that,
And I would say that we're talking about getting rid of the river as a dividing line. I'd love to not have Troost as a dividing line, but I say that knowing full well that Mr. Adams might jump down at me here. But I know that's, I know where the populations are. I know that that's the line that I understand
There's
that.
segregation in neighborhoods,
No, 100%,
need
I
that to
agree.
keep 5 with a
minority
minority
population,
majority.
right.
I agree. It's just a matter of, I don't know what the populations are or what the
Yeah.
difference in that 6A versus 4A.
But, and I
is.
want to make a point too, just really, it's not just the black people in this. I was on some commission one time drawing some lines, and we drew Hyde Park over at the east of and those people over there had a fit. I mean, they want no part of that majority black district.
Yeah.
Okay.
Other thoughts for 6A before we move to CMT? I do want to give some air to CMT. I mean, CM2. Say, what's CMT? Cal, do you want to do a high level, and then let's go over overall. Now that we've kind of walked through each one, now we can begin to craft and do some shifting.
So once again, this is a map that as we were trying to balance some of the things that we had heard, and we were working through things that we knew you guys had asked for and worked. This was components of one built from the 3rd and 5th district and how they relate to the 6th district that just continued to show themselves when we were changing things. This map does a good job also of keeping relatively small change from the existing districts. And when I say relative, obviously when you look at it, there's some that are a little more sizable as we go forward. But the numbers balance out quite well. It does keep everything relatively compact. There is still 4th district, which generally matches the shape of the existing 4th district, still has a lot of irregular context or a lot of different contexts inside of it. Beyond that, we'll answer any questions. Brian, if I missed anything, please let me know.
I'd now like to go to, as you kind of walk through all of these, and if we could configure the best of, think of it a greatest hits compilation. What would that be, map style, as we move towards? Go ahead, Cal.
One additional thing on this one, when you look at probably one of the more compelling things about this one when we did it is where the largest portion of the Hispanic population came into. It came into the 4th district. So it pulled it out of the 3rd or the 5th. So it isn't competing with those two districts currently. And that was the one thing when we were trying to solve for with other maps that kept showing us. So I wouldn't say the most merit on this scenario is that one, but it is one. Listening to Pedro speak so many times, this is one of the ones we were constantly trying to chase down. And it's not the only scenario that would work, but it is one that matches many of the other concepts very, very well. But there's also, as people are going to mention pretty soon, some other challenges with it.
Can Dale, what's his name, Dale? What's the guy's name over there?
Brian?
Brian?
Oh, Brian, okay.
Okay.
Can you tell us the southern boundaries of the 3rd district?
Oh, yeah.
Other considerations? Martin, I know you've been holding. Would you like to? And we'll come back to Commissioner Adams and Brian's question.
Sure. I've mentioned quite a bit earlier about kind of what I was talking about with, if we can go to map 4A, the CM2 map and the 4A map really, to me, I thought if you could put some sort of iteration of those together, that would work. So if you can get to the 4A map, I can just kind of talk a little bit about what I was envisioning.
Commissioner Adam, it's 55th Street,
Okay, thank you.
and as I'm shuttling here, apologies.
If you want to go ahead, Commissioner Adams.
No, I just had a question. No, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Sure.
And what's the boundary on the southern end of 4 and CM2 and 4A?
43rd, Broadway, 39th.
43rd, Broadway, 39th. So Commissioner Vicky's question.
I want to, well, I'm
the
curious about
southern
what your
boundary of the
reaction is
3rd?
to,
I think
No, what did
4
you
is going
just
to
say?
have a problem cutting the plaza out of 4, but I don't think we should split it. I think it needs to go one way or the
Taller
other.
than,
Okay.
And
Thank
to get what we need to achieve down here, I understand it's all got to push north, which is why I thought the other scenario might help with that. If we lose the plaza, you can't chop Westport and Midtown in half. And it changes, that changes a lot, commercial and residential, and to keep it at least at 43rd minimum without jogging over, that would help.
you said not split Westport for what?
Yeah, if we're gonna do that, put all of Westport in 4 and all of the plaza in 6, if we have to do that.
So we're talking on the screen, we're on the right, we're talking about Westport, Broadway, and 39th Street.
Right. Bring all of it down to 43rd.
Yeah, and the challenge with that is we, one way or the other, when we move that either up or down, in keeping everything else balanced, it drops the population up too high, I think.
What,
Correct, Ryan?
We're just getting chopped up on either end.
Yeah.
let me ask you a question.
It kind of shifts everything. So if we move that down to 43rd, then the predominantly Hispanic percentage of 4 decreases. In this scenario, 6 is real skinny, so we do need to get additional population. It would just take some shifting. It's always kind of like a domino effect. You move one thing and a number of things.
How does changing that change the Hispanic count?
Mostly white population in that 39th to 43rd on the east side of Broadway. So that would bring down the Hispanic percentage of 4,
Bring it down from what?
22%, 28%.
And what is it now?
The current.
Madam Chair.
Yeah.
In this scenario, it is
In the scenario or
23.
now, currently?
CM2 or 4A?
CM2 is
Okay.
23.2.
But the voting age is 19.8, what are we looking at?
Madam Chair.
Mike?
And-
Yes.
Yes.
And what is it
So I
knock it
think
down to?
to my earlier comment, and I realize that was probably about an hour
An hour
ago.
ago.
And we've had many other comments since then. I think the answer could be, and I'll throw this out here to the group, that you take the 3rd and 4th district boundaries from CM2 and put them on 4A, and you're essentially shifting those things over. And I know there's going to be some other boundary shifts that are going to have to make the population work, but I think it answers the issue around 43rd Street, keeps Westport intact. It also brings, from, again, an anecdotal perspective, and this is something that will have to be vetted out through the boundaries and the demographic data that's pulled from the census blocks. I think it'll also, if you bring 4 down to, as it's shown in CM2, it will assist with getting the conversation down to, or I guess it would go down to 12th Street. It would increase population of the Hispanic population in 4 as well, while also allowing 4 to still be within the 10% rule and pretty much equal in rough estimates. I think this is something we need to look at. And I think if you make 3rd the equivalent of CM2, you maintain the black or African American percentages that we are trying to achieve based on conversation around this commission. So that was a long way to say if you just take CM2 and superimpose it on 4A with the 3rd and 4th, then you can achieve, I think, what we're talking about here and not splitting up Westport.
So a revision would be beginning with CM2,
Yep. And
maintaining which of the existing CM2 districts and
3rd.
boundaries? So maintain,
3rd, and so the southern boundary of 4th
okay,
and CM2.
Yep.
Where it comes down to Truman, but I think we agreed 12th was what we wanted to do. So you wouldn't go down that far, which actually would help because you wouldn't take on that much more population.
The northern boundary, you said the northern boundary of 3 would be 12th Street? All
Yes.
the way across?
Yes.
And then just draw the 3rd, then put your 3rd district further south into the 5th?
It would be it would actually stay the same.
Oh,
The only thing that would move is the
Population
northern
would move.
boundary.
The northern boundary would
it's right
move.
here already, so what we,
Yeah, the northern boundary does move a little bit. If you look at CM2, it's essentially that boundary of the 4th and the 3rd on the north end of or the north of 3rd and south of 4th on the east side. Is that enough direction in there? Then that will achieve what we're talking about and still, I believe, maintain the 43rd Street east-west boundary.
I will admit what worked really well for us last time is people actually putting pen to paper.
I've got it written down.
Hang on a second, I'll give you a
You know,
marker.
Mike's on this, right? He's been drawing lines, but I am curious about.
Well,
I don't want to adversely affect these percentages. I like the 55 and 53 percentages of
I think the
over
way
18 age population.
the way that Mike has it drawn, that should get the 3rd to 54% African American, close to, because that was probably with it going down to Truman Road. So going up to 12th Street, it'll be a little different, but it should get the 3rd to 54%. It should get the 5th to 56.9 or 57%. And the voting age is 52% in the 3rd. And the 5th is very close to that 56% as well. It also would make the 4th approximately 23% Hispanic, and then the African American population would be approximately 14%. So that would give the minorities in the 4th district 37%. And that's the best chance at getting a minority represented district outside of the 3rd and the 5th, if you have those boundaries there. And it also allows us to stay within that 10% that we're working with on the total population boundaries as well.
Why don't we
Pedro?
just take that map.
Right. Martin came with these notes, honey. He's ready. No, but Pedro, Chris, thoughts?
The opening statement about splitting neighborhoods and coalitions, we should keep in
Yep.
consideration as we take that 12th Street as the dividing line. In previous conversations with Commissioner Adams, we talked about the historical black institutional boundaries of being 12th and 18th Street and Vine. And we did look at the growing Latino population that comes south into the 3rd District up to about 27th Street. And so we're cognizant of not competing or replacing. These maps give us a fair, a realistic look at how we can get closer to putting a proposal together for Saturday. And I'm quite certain there's a lot of folks either viewing or that will be visiting with us to provide enough feedback to those two neighborhoods and coalitions that are straddling the 3rd and 4th boundaries right there.
Thank you for that. So being able to make some adjustments and presenting that can give us a really great feedback vehicle for communities. Chris, Reed, any considerations for 5th and or 6th district?
I mean, in a perfect scenario, I'd love for Westport to be fully in the 4th. I totally understand that. And then down on the 5th and 6th, north-south, down there near Cerner and Hickman Mills, I'm just kind of curious on the different scenarios. Is there a way that we could separate those school districts and keep them, one in the 6th and one in the 5th? Is that even possible? I mean, in an ideal scenario, that would be what we would like, or I would like. And just to clarify, truce can't be the dividing line because that little jag is a precinct. Is that correct?
Whatever is drawn right now follows a precinct line.
Okay.
So,
In 4A, though, it comes over here, right? A little bit.
yeah, there's several up and down there. So
Yeah.
it might be that one of the other maps uses a different lines, but anything we've drawn right now
Just with that
It-
consideration.
is with that consideration.
Yeah.
Because I've suggested, and I think doctors suggested it too, if we could just include truce as that and then move that over might help us, but what I'm saying is that's not an option because of the precincts.
Could be. We'll check. I will say when you get down to that corner right there of the Hickman Mills School District, that's where you've got a lot of diversity in the makeup of those districts. So whether they're in or out one of the districts can really push the percentages of Black or African American votes one way or the other. That's the only reason we didn't include that southwest corner of the Hickman Mills School District in 5.
Can I ask, why are we tweaking CM2? What's the purpose of tweaking it? What are the issues with it? Because I kind of like it.
Is that coming at 12?
Well, small shifts.
What-
Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, I would, and I'm not trying to jump the conversation, but I would propose that to your point, the maps that we would take to the public meeting, and I just want to put this out here to start discussion, would be an amended 4A, based on the comments tonight. CM2. And then I think you would take a conglomeration of CM2 or 4A
Yeah.
with the conversation that we've had tonight around the boot on Fifth.
Oh, yeah, new map, to try to get the boot,
Yes,
get the boot, put both boots in the 6th district.
yes.
So
That's new map.
just as a point of clarification, when we started the process looking at when we should have public meetings, we considered maps that we'd already viewed versus ones quite honestly, we will not have time to produce maps between now and Saturday.
Okay.
So, not trying to stop any progress. I think where you're going is absolutely spectacular, but I do think it's my job to tell you
Manage that
we can't do it.
Well, can we put the one that I think it was a minimal change map, I had one of the first scenarios
Yeah.
that kept both boots in the, I think it was scenario, no, it wasn't 4.
Is it 3?
What was it?
3.
3?
Yes.
Can we use that one maybe?
So are you suggesting 3, CM2?
Yeah, I guess whatever one that was the
4A,
minimal
and then
change,
the
they kept both, they had both boots in the 6th district, if I remember.
Yeah.
That being the closest.
Yeah.
So that's shown on screen on the left side right now.
Right.
It's full screen at
That's
this
that
point.
one.
That is scenario 3.
And
Yeah.
off the top of my head, I can't remember how it broke down.
I don't think we would want that one, would we?
Tough.
Is that it?
It was tough. I mean, what that holds is with
Third one,
District 6 having both boots.
Yeah, but 3rd goes all the way up.
Nothing else was,
Doesn't want the 3rd going to the river?
nothing else we had
No, we
consensus
don't want to put that
on.
out. No, we don't want
Okay.
So just, we want to be careful.
to, no, we don't want to put that one out.
CM2 and then the mashup that Mark and Mike.
The mashup can be an up and coming, but to Cal's point, he's saying that the new with the all boot and some of these iterations wouldn't be available for
Oh,
Saturday.
no, I'm
Yeah, they
not,
can't
I'm not
produce it.
suggesting the, both boots, although I hear my
You
colleague.
hear you? Yes.
I'm saying is that we talk about CM2 4A, and I thought the new map is the one that Mike is talking about. That is a combination of mashup that Mark and Mac, that's the
Right.
only one that we're adding.
Would you be able to produce one map by Saturday if
I'm
we
going to
asked
look
you
at you
really
and then
nicely?
spin my head this way, and I got a thumbs up. I believe we can.
Okay.
And that is, Dr. Hill, to your point, what this, let me
Yes.
see, Mike, where, the new one
Yes.
Sorry. What-
that we just did. I think it's up underneath that,
I got too many.
that packet.
Okay.
This one right here,
What is,
which is,
So-
that's the small shift one.
So are we wanting to shift 4A and promote CM2 to a scenario and another one, or is it just the shift to 4A?
I think.
I think this right, from what I'm hearing, this is the shift
Yeah, that's
that
the
we're
shift
talking
to 4A.
about.
Okay,
And then you have 4A
as it sits, okay,
and CM2.
CM2.
perfect.
I'm sorry, I can't see, what's the shift?
The shift was what we,
It's the conglomeration of the CM2
Mm-hmm.
and 4A, which is
thank you, sir.
moving 3rd down, or the northern boundary of 3rd to 12th.
That most recent conversation we just
Yep. And
finished up
the
with.
southern boundary of 4th to 43rd, not cutting Westport.
I like it.
So this one would reflect, at least in the 4th district, a line all the way across at Westport on the south.
Yeah, 43rd completely,
Mm-hmm.
yes.
Just, there's a lot of pressure to keep the plaza in 4, and I think it comes from what happened to 6 last time.
Mm-hmm.
They got mad, they got pushed up, and 4 divided several neighborhoods right in half to come up to 59. So that was not well accepted. This takes it up even farther. So since the Midtown meeting is Saturday, the first one, that I think, I don't know how many people will come, but I think we need to at least leave one option in here where Westport is together and just take the, I think,
Let's put together in the 4th district.
Is there one of our
have a map?
existing maps?
no, Westport,
Is
yeah,
that what you
Westport
just
in the
drew?
fourth
Map
district.
two,
Is
That's
that,
what, let me see that.
Yeah.
You finish with that?
it's a
Scenario 2, if we can
you
look
go.
at scenario
See
2.
that in sync.
Yeah. I think that was the one that I had too, yeah.
I think Mike just drew that though in the mashup, didn't he?
Here. Shoot that
I
around
think
if
it's
he wants.
farther north than what they're talking about.
So this is scenario 2 on screen. This would have been one of the maps we discussed at our previous session.
oh, that's both boots.
Yeah.
That's both boots, right? Yeah.
Let's see the numbers.
So, 3rd district, the Black or African percent is 43,
Right.
56.
That line is tough.
Percent for 5, 29% of the Hispanic vote would be in the 3rd district.
We don't have the
Well,
voting
well,
age.
I don't think we ought to waste our time producing that map, I don't.
We don't have the voting,
Well, that map is already,
here. I mean, over 18.
It's not a scenario, is it? Is it a scenario?
yeah, that's the
That's one we
second.
threw.
That was the 2 scenario that we already,
This was one of the ones that showed a complete
Threw that out last meeting.
Right.
plaza
Yeah,
in
we
a
did
4th.
not, we did not move it forward
I-
because of those things.
Yeah.
I understand, I understand the repercussions. I don't want to necessarily have one. I think I have to explain to a lot of people why the plaza can't stay in the fourth, including,
Wouldn't the mayor for one?
thank you. And so I'm not asking for an alternative that does that. I'm looking for justification for
Right.
people to explain why that can't happen, since some of the other scenarios that allow that to come farther south, there's not enough support for, even though I would like to ask the public what they think about those. But
Yeah,
if
I
we
do too.
And I
don't
think we
have a
should.
consensus about the
Scenario 2.
North District straddling the
well, we
river,
won't
which
have time
I
to make it.
don't think we have any consensus to do. I'd like to know what other people think about that, but that's okay. I think we just need to,
I agree. I
we
think
need,
we-
four is gonna have to get justified to a whole lot of different constituencies, and I don't really know that we have all the answers
I'd like
for
to have
that.
some, I really like to have some input. I think, and I'm gonna eventually probably defer to the Northland Commissioners, but I'd like to have some public input on the whole concept of having more than one district straddle the river. You know, I see, I got a fundamental problem with it because it so disruptive to the Latino community. But there are also some other factors I'd like to just hear people think besides, what we discussed here. It might not be any interest in it at all, it probably might not even come up on Saturday, or next week, but.
Well, Commissioner Adams, I hear you. Well, I got 2 questions. The first question, maybe just post to everyone, is I'm not familiar with the process for the public meeting. If there is a summary or discussion from staff about, hey, we've done these things, and
Yeah.
how we ended here is we looked at how do we keep the plaza and Westport in the same district, and that moved, like, that was one question. I think that is super helpful, as well as a discussion about, keeping both boots, so people know we went through that. The second thing is, I think if we are going to look at a boundary that goes across the river, then I think you also have to add your horizontal, right? So if you're asking to disrupt the Latino community and have it go up, I think that as part of discussion, not saying, making any decisions, you need to get feedback on the horizontal. And we might land here, but I think to only offer
That's right.
Latino population being, broken up to achieve that boundary.
I mean horizontal on the
Yeah.
north.
Horizontal 1 and 2.
Commissioner, if I
Please.
could.
We can't, so they're gonna, I heard you saying, so
Yeah.
Okay, Commissioner Mike?
I think that, I think it would not, while I understand the discussion, I think it would be, misleading is not the correct term, but it wouldn't be the best function, I think, to put a scenario out there that we're not even considering. And the reason that we're not considering it is because it doesn't meet any of the needs of really anyone. And so I would hate to do that, to just create confusion or to
Talking about
create a
the-
talking point around something
Like
that,
the one with multiple districts,
well, any of them, I mean, if we already looked at, the scenarios we already looked at and we didn't move forward because of numerous issues that weren't even considered, I think to put those out there would be, would just create confusion and we might end up spending more time talking about those that we know we're not going to move forward on rather than the ones that we really want to get the most feedback on.
I understand that, and I completely understand our argument about the, trying to keep the Hispanic communities together, although this one we're leaving out the Northland ones, they're on their own now. But I do think as we explain things that we should at least say somewhere, we explored another idea for these reasons, and the impacts, you know, on the others were not acceptable to us, but at least explain that we looked at some things that are not, the same as what everybody's perception is now. And I think at some point in the future, the city's gonna have to deal with this issue, about the diversity north of the river and who the council people are and who they represent, and that the growth north of the river is expected to be probably up in the northwest corner, right? Is that what you're, northeast corner?
It would be
That's what
north,
you're saying.
actually, it's more central Northland is where the planned growth is.
Which, but that's not probably gonna be a very diverse community, so, I just think we don't have to show that as an example, but I do think when we're talking about how all this stuff is connected, I mean, I think people would be amazed that there's only two options that seem to make sense. I mean, anybody who's never done this before knows there's a million options. We're cutting out a whole bunch of options because we don't want to disrupt every single district that much.
And I think it's the acknowledgement from the commissions, and this kind of goes back to my ongoing question about what's at stake and who, and kind of what has been the rising priority or guiding factor for each district. And as I've been listening, you know, we've talked about for District 1 and 2, maintaining this growth, and you all get me right. This is just me reflecting on what I've heard. District 3 being able to maintain the voting rights and representation and not creating or replacing that with a Hispanic vote necessarily. District 4 creating better opportunity for Hispanic representation. District 5, once again, maintaining that voting piece. And for District 6, voting piece and representation for the Black community. And then for District 6, this the school district split, and then also kind of creating some continuity or this compact district for District 6. At least those were kind of what I caught. What am I missing? Because I think to Dr. Hill's question, which is the next portion of our conversation, I think it's important for us to be clear so that as we are listening, we can identify what we are missing so that when we come back to this, we can add those considerations to the ones that we've already naturally come to the conclusion of.
I think you missed there's some interest or some concern about maintaining the, or minimizing the negative impact on the neighborhoods in the 4th district.
So in addition to the Hispanic.
They got to weigh that factor with the Latino issue over there. But you've got, right now, the 4th district has the Plaza, Westport, Downtown, Old Northeast, Briarcliff. And then Vicky talks about the affordable housing neighborhood with affordable housing over there that are being, I guess, being disrupted by this. So that is a.
On District 4?
Yeah. District 4, you know, it bore the brunt, well, the 6th district and the 4th district bore the brunt of the change 10 years ago. And now this time, it's like most of it's falling on the 4th. But I mean, I don't know, there's no way to get around it when you only have 6 districts.
Well, that's why I think.
Which brings up our recommendation.
That's why I think we have to explain this, because when you look at this, it looks like, I mean, I think everybody's consensus in here is to protect 3 and 5 as much as possible with their minority vote. I don't think anybody's.
And
ever
create a
disagreed with it.
Hispanic.
And if you take that as our biggest area of consensus as a given, then we looked at other options, and what we're coming out with are just things that significantly affect Ford and nobody else. And so I just think we're going to have to justify that somehow. And I'm not sure, other than pulling our 2 Hispanic major neighborhoods together, at least south of the river, and is the only
Would that be,
It's the
could we
only
explain
reason
that?
it's-
But do we explain that, do we show it? I guess Chris's point is what's your name again, I'm sorry?
Mike?
Mike?
Mike.
Mike, the map
I'm old, so please forgive me, I'm old. And that is that we, is by showing that map, maybe, or can we explain that map to say, when we try to address those concerns, by drawing part of the, first district south of the river, this is what happens. And so, and it's not acceptable, so that's why we had plans up this way. I mean, do we explain that to them, or do we
Yeah, I mean,
show a map that way, or what? I mean, I'm just putting that out.
yeah, what I'm hearing from Mike and I agree with. I mean, our responses will be what they are as you hear them and respond to them. And so we want to do that. I think that also we want to be listeners to what is being said. Now, if there are some direct questions, why did you all, what's going on with here? I think each of us are positioned to be able to have our responses as best represents our thoughts. And I would say let's hold one another accountable in those responses. But being able to have something for the community members to respond to that keeps us moving forward is the essence of what I heard you say, which is what I agree with. And I will also remind us that this is not the end of our reiteration of mapping, that even the mashup that we want to provide with Cal, that him and his team may or may not. I think Brian said that he can do this particular one, but even the ones that will come after, there are still possibilities for that. So this doesn't stop us, but we are committed to having these conversations and having some reaction, because we will have a ton of feedback that we will continue to leverage to shape the maps that are to come. So I hope that's.
Well, Vicky, what can we do, Vicky? What do you want us to do? I mean, how do you want us to address your concerns?
I think at the meeting, and wherever, I'm not sure the meetings, me in the public meeting, it's going to be most helpful to anybody who attends to understand the data and the background about this. And because we're going to get a lot of, what if you did this, what if you did this, and what if you did this, which we have done, and we can show them, we've done all of this, and here's what the issues keep coming down to. And so we want your feedback on, and I can count, so I know that,
The only
5
way
of
to
these
stabilize,
districts are gonna be pretty happy.
the only way to really stabilize the fourth district is by taking something out. Some neighborhoods have to go out. And I guess what the commission has indicates there's no consensus for, is taking the old northeast and putting it in the first district. And rather than do that, we're gonna take some of these we're gonna keep the old northeast over there, and then,
Yeah, I mean, I understand that's a trade-off nobody's willing to make. I think we should at least explain
Yeah. So,
that we looked at it and why, because otherwise, if it weren't for that,
I hear you.
I think it's a good time to start with the districts dealing with the way we're growing.
And just as a Northlander, I appreciate you bringing up the point of trying to eliminate the river as the boundary. And I think we're taking strides in other ways and things like that. But right now, with the way the population sits, I just wouldn't feel comfortable making that leap over the river right now with this district at the expense of the possibility for Hispanic representation. That's
it's the
my
only
only
reason.
issue.
I support it also,
Yeah.
but I think numbers-wise and constituency-wise, 4's just gonna have a lot of conflicting constituencies in it. The rest of these are almost homogeneous.
Yes. That's the one piece, I'm sorry to cut you off, but that was the one piece I was gonna add. All 3 maps are so similar that it doesn't show a contrast of thought or ideas. And so that's something that I would say, it doesn't give the community very much to respond to because they're so similar.
So with that being said, what would the city be providing as visual aids for Saturday's meeting that could help streamline the storytelling
Yep.
of how we got to these maps and some of the trade-offs that we have to make?
Yeah, and that's what I'm tracking with Vicky, and I appreciate what you continue to stress is how are we supplying our community members with data and background information so that they can understand where we are at. And so, Cal, of course, if you want to speak to that, what my recommendation is that we have a walkthrough, not to necessarily sit over as we're presenting it, but to really be able to say, this has been the history of this. This is the flow, and these are the discussion points with you all being able to share what those particular pieces. That's why I was doing a quick kind of key considerations for each district that guided us to what we're offering, because I don't want to get in the mix of being performative. Not that that's what you were suggesting, but to just connect these two. We have to share and give some insight. Well, how did we get here? And so I think having that time before we move into whichever of the iterations, it sounds like we're at 3 of them, that we'll be able to share to get that feedback. I would also ask for you all to be prepared to talk about what's at stake or key considerations for your respective districts. That is how we started off our time together in our first meeting, so that so you can get a chance to reflect what you have heard and what also has been guiding your shepherding of this process. I think that'll be really important. That way we can ask our community members, what have we missed? What didn't you hear that needs to be considered? And we can manage those expectations. But open to other thoughts. We do have some points of feedback that have been shared with us this evening that I want to make sure that I offer. But any other considerations about the flow and what will be important and what you want to make sure is part of the community meetings? Yes.
Madam Chair, the only thing I would say is keeping in the spirit of the meetings being listening sessions, I would encourage all of us to keep our comments
Yes.
very concise, so that we don't take up the time for the public comment.
Totally agree. We want to use our comments as more information sharing as far as how did we get here.
Yes, but I do believe the narrative and however we can deliver the iterative process that we've been going through, we need to do that, because I agree it tells the story and explains how we got to where we're at.
Yeah. Thank you. Other thoughts or considerations that help build this out or confirm your expectation?
I just after listening to Vicki for the last few minutes, I do think 2 years from now, the thing that I'm going to hear most in my neighborhood is why is the plaza in the 6th district, and how stupid that is.
No one wants it.
Kind of very similar as when they moved 75th to was 75th Street, and they moved it to 63rd or whatever. Not that I don't agree with it. Most people won't look into the in depth on why this happened.
Process.
They're just going to look at that simple thing, and Vicki and I are going to hear about it for 10 years. So that's the only thing that goes through my mind. I don't have a solution. It's just, it is what it is.
Thank you. Other thoughts? Dr. Hill?
I'm not even sure I support this recommendation.
Wait a minute.
As I say it, right?
As soon as you say it.
I know, because I think of all the reasons why people might push back. But I think there are a few maps, and the staff can think through, of like printing those maps that we did not use and the reason why, like as a walkthrough, right? So people
A walking gallery.
visually see and can look, and I know that's a lot of money, and I know it would take time to add, this is the reason why this map did not advance. So it's almost like maps that did not advance, and here's why. I'm not asking for any of the fours, right, without the 10% rule. I'm saying it gives people, as they come in before we get there, an opportunity. And then also just making sure I understand the process is people are giving feedback, but it's not for us to respond, right? On why.
We don't have to
it's for us,
defend.
right? It's
That's
for
right.
us to listen. But I'm visual, so I think something about seeing it, being up close to the big map, and then with the rationale close to the map of why, even as you give your summary.
So we've already printed the previous maps off. We haven't printed the new ones off yet. I'm not sure. I'd have to relook at all the meeting notes if we collected why we did or didn't pick certain ones. So I'd have to look at the minutes. When I'm tracking stuff, I'm tracking changes. I'm not necessarily tracking
Rationale.
why you guys may or may not pick a certain selection. So we'll do the best that we can from the notes, and at a minimum, what we can really do is pull the stats out that say, hey, it doesn't do this, it intersects that when we push one way or the other. Those can be relatively bulleted, relatively straightforward. So on just the statistics side, staff can do that. On the decision-making side, we'll look at the notes, but I quite honestly, I usually don't read them. We're moving on to making the maps.
Right.
If they're not detailed on how they're put together, that may not be something we can
No,
we can
totally
commit to.
understand. I think some, like we just talked about too, which has maybe the plaza and the Westport together. Oh, this pushed us way north of the river, problem. I'm not saying that that's the map we use, but I'm looking for like a high-level bullet, which probably will just come out in the data.
It's
and
gonna be in the
stats
stats.
Yeah, when we describe them, it's probably, those are the points we try to bring up. We won't present those as pros or cons. They're just going to be,
Facts.
Impasse.
yeah.
And any gaps that need to be filled in can be filled in by you all.
That's right.
As Kyle goes through the bullet points that are based on the data, for sure.
I think that's a good idea, Dr. Hill, and I think for meetings like this, in our experience on the planning side, I know we're gonna do it in PowerPoint, and they're all gonna be set up for that, but to get the bigger maps, like we ran off already, up around the room, because people are gonna wanna get up and see exactly what is happening where, and if they can give them a little time to do that when they come in, and then in the presentation, which I'm assuming you will give.
We've got one presentation put together, which was the first one we gave you guys. Beyond that, we have,
Well, it would just be that, and
Yep.
an opening from the chair, what you've already done. I'm trying to keep you from doing anything more.
Right.
And just run some of these scenarios on big maps so we can say, we didn't just zero in on two things that look exactly the same. I mean, we went through lots of these, and they all had impacts that were not very equal, which is why we ended up where we did. But we want to hear from you about that, and if you have questions about why we didn't pick one, any of us could answer those, I think. And to at least say, this one, doesn't do this, it cuts the percentage down to this, and so we moved on. I mean, I just think the more information people have, the better this will go.
And to
And I think
Dr.
people
Hill,
need to understand what these issues are.
Right.
to Dr. Hill's point, I think you could even print them on the small, like on a large cardboard piece, but print them this size. And just on the same board, it'd just kind of be a storyboard, and there'd just be 3 bullet points of why this one didn't work or something like that, if that was something that we wanted to do, because I do think that's a great idea as well.
Yeah, really appreciate the thought of the walking gallery. It gives people, and even, as we think about, because I want to maintain the fact that these are listening sessions for us. And so going through that presentation, giving what our mandates are and what our commitments are to this process, and then being able to talk about it with each of us being able to share in those pieces, and then really being able to go through curious of you all's thoughts, to break it out by districts and say, hey, District 1, what are your thoughts or considerations? Are you all comfortable with that as it relates to really how do we organize getting the feedback so that, one, we're able to really isolate and lift up what's the impact for better or for worse and what's at stake, and then also to give you all a chance to organize your hearing. So are you okay with that approach, or do you have another approach for consideration? So the question is just going through, saying those of you that would like, that can give feedback and key considerations for District 1, we'd love to hear your thoughts after we go through the presentation and be able to talk about what some of the scenarios are.
As far as organizing, saying,
The listeners, organizing the community members and having them share their feedback. Because this is a community feedback session, so we have to hear them.
So you mean giving feedback by district from the public?
Yes. So those of you that want to speak to District 1, any feedback and considerations. So that's my thought about how we do that. I want to get your feedback on if you feel like that'll be sufficient in helping you listen and hear community members.
what's worked well in the past, because I'm afraid that that's going to turn into, I want to speak about 1, then I want to speak about 2, and then I want to speak about 4, when we could say, here's the 3 maps that we've been studying, and what's the feedback on what we've got.
A more
What's-
consolidated.
That's
I
my
think
only
That approach
concern.
better?
Yeah, I think people will, if we start going by district, then people start defending immediately rather than looking at, our job is to look at the city as a whole and get the most equitable representation we can, paying attention to the specifics of our city.
So
And
open
so I think
feedback.
opening up, just, what do you think about this option? And then if they say, I don't like what it does to District 1, then they'll talk about that. And some, I just think, because not everybody's going to be there. It's not going to match where the meeting is. If I can't go on Saturday, I'm going to go to this one on
Yeah.
Monday. So whatever. I think we leave it open and ask them to also keep an open mind about it. And if they have specific questions about specific districts, you'll be able to answer those.
So
comments
present
on that.
all three maps and then give response, or responses after each presentation of the three options, or the three that will be presented.
All three.
Yeah, present them all three, and then take input, or take feedback.
Okay.
Or we'll get bogged down like we did.
Yeah.
I know, it's just based on a couple assumptions that people can track information like that the overwhelming nature of information won't disrupt feedback. So there's all kind of cognitive learners and people have different needs, but I appreciate you all's feedback and definitely open. What I'm hearing is present, once we go through the opening presentation with Cal giving us some feedback, we'll go through what our purpose and structure, what those things are. Then we can move through all three maps, and then we'll just open it up for feedback. And that'll be the same format that we offer at all three. Did I hear a thought from over here? Want to make sure I was paying attention? No?
I do have
Yes.
a question. How long would you like to provide each public commenter to provide their suggestions and feedback? Typically in council, it's about 2 minutes, but I do want to pose that question to you all because the clerk's office is going to be the one timing and manning the speaker card. So I would like to pose that question to the commission.
I'm fine with 2 minutes. Any objection? Okay. We have 2 hours. And we are expecting engagement from our community. I want to really be aware of our time. I think we've had a really great discussion. There are several points of feedback. I see you looking at your watch. I see chats. Yeah, our time is moved. But you know what? I gave y'all time last time, so this is just me taking that time back. Remember that high five? Yeah. So some of these comments have been definitely represented in our commissioner talks, but a comment from 64117, this is since we have started our meeting. The writer writes, as a Northlander, I love the idea of removing the river as a boundary in our city. I think the city is far too segregated from north-south, and I would love to have more than one district cross the river. I heard in the meeting one of the members said the river is no longer a barrier. I would strongly disagree. Growing up in the Northland, and still many people think of us as a different city than south of the river. I hate that, and I want to feel more connected to the rest of my city. I live directly north of the Northeast area, and I would love to be connected to a region that feels much more culturally and economically similar to me than the far north regions of my district near Liberty. So thank you for that point of feedback. We also have another community member, 64117. Watching the live stream, I saw a few of the maps having the 4th district reach all the way to Chateau. That lumps my neighborhood in with the wealthier neighborhoods of Briarcliff, downtown, and Westport. Those neighborhoods are too culturally and economically dissimilar to this area. I think it would be a good idea to move that boundary over to North Oak, Crestview, and Chatamir neighborhoods. Shamir, thank you. Neighborhoods would be a better fit into the 1st district. So thank you for your comments. We'll continue to be good stewards of that. I also see that we have some comments in the chat. And thank you to the community members that said, hey, please introduce yourselves. That is totally my fault. I'll take full responsibility for that. We will begin to start our meetings with introductions with our name and the districts that we are representing so that we can have some clarity. And so thank you for that reminder. Melissa, any additional comments you'd like to lift up?
No, I think there were some explanations and further context about the conversation you all had about prior elections. Forrestine Beasley commented that they changed the boundaries and that is why Scott moved. The second district used to include downtown, and the Northeast had first and third districts. We had 9th Street and then Independence Ave as boundaries. Thank you, Ms. Beasley, for that context. And then she further added, Old Northeast was in the first district, well, north of Independence Ave of Northeast was in the first, south was third. Another person asked for the link to the redistricting website, which I have just entered into the chat. But I think that about covers the comments in the chat, other than asking you all to introduce yourselves.
Yes, thank you for that.
The
And
Northeast has been in the Northland District before. Right.
yes,
Right, yeah.
Well,
yes.
Yeah, one was north of the river and two was
Mm-hmm.
all the
Right.
way across with northeast. That's
Population.
why I joined West Side.
Population was about 30,000 less than it is now too. Then
Well, all of this,
it shrunk.
all of this is a reminder that things change as they're continuing to change. And so thank you all so much for sharing your additional time. If you all have any, as commissioners, any additional consideration, especially as we confirm our agendas for the upcoming community meetings, I will send that out to you all for you just to be able to confirm that, and we will go from there. Any other particular comments or thoughts about what you need to be successful as we continue to move forward? Okay, thank you. We're walking deeper into this work. So thank you all, and it is 6:22. We'll adjourn our meeting.